Well, we've been saying that Kure is a powerful oxygen supplement for quite some time now. We've got a lot of science to back us up, but perhaps none quite as powerful as what we're going to share with you today. We're here at London Southbank University, where a crack team of researchers has just finished a study about the benefits of drinking just one bottle of Kure before exercise. And as you're about to hear, the results are nothing short of extraordinary. Kure is proven to contain 10 times more oxygen than regular water. But now we can tell you with scientific certainty that the oxygen inside each and every bottle of Kure does indeed make its way into your body and all the way to your skin. The big question now though, what does your body do with all that extra oxygen? Well, you're going to hear from a couple of the researchers themselves about the impact that Kure has on lactate buildup, on blood pressure, on intra and extracellular volume, on recovery and performance. The benefits for professional and competitive athletes that stem from lower blood pressure and reduced lactate alone are profound. And remember, this is just water, pure H2O, but with more O2 than you'll find anywhere else. Steve Hunter, Associate Professor and Exercise Physiologist of some 30 years here at London Southbank University. Yep. You have headed up the Human Performance Centre here, where you have conducted a good number of trials and development on new products. It's a real pleasure to have you with us on the Kure Lab. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So let's start at the start. What was it about Kure that excited you so much about performing and conducting a trial like this one?
Well, I think, we at the Human Performance Centre, as you said, are really interested in innovative technology. And there's been a number of studies that have been done around oxygenated water. Their results have been equivocal in terms of the outcomes, so, non-conclusive findings. We thought that this may have much more potential in terms of that oxygen getting into the body rather than it being lost when the bottle's opened.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and that's the really interesting thing about Kure versus other so-called oxygen waters is that, with most competitors, you open the cap, the oxygen molecule, of course, weighs less than the H2O molecule, and so it simply gases off from the bottle the minute that you take off the lid.
Yeah.
With Kure, and the brilliant thing that our amazing scientists have been able to do, they've actually stabilised negatively buoyant oxygen nanobubbles in the water itself. What that means is that the only way to get the stuff out is to drink it.
Yeah.
So it's really a fascinating scientific and technological breakthrough.
Well, there's huge benefits if we can gain more oxygen from an ergogenic aid like Kure, essentially, in the direct impacts it has on the performance of an athlete, for example. It may delay fatigue, it may change metabolism, it may accelerate recovery. So, if Kure is supplying oxygen into the body, what are the direct effects on performance? That's what we want to look at, because athletes will be really, really interested in this from a performance, a training and a recovery perspective.
So let's get straight into that. And we've got some other questions about the trial I want to come back to in a second, but I think that you raised a really good point, because it is a matter of scientific fact that Kure does indeed contain 120.25 milligrams per litre of dissolved oxygen. You compare and contrast that with regular water, which has between 6.5 and 8.5 milligrams per litre of dissolved oxygen. That's why we can confidently say that we have 10 times more oxygen than regular water without running afoul of your advertising regulator over here. So I think that the threshold question here is, if we acknowledge that there is additional oxygen in the water, which we've been able to prove, what actually happens when that oxygen goes into the body? And let's start potentially by talking about transcutaneous oxygen and what was actually uncovered in that area throughout this study.
Yeah, so the results of the study showed us that there was an increase in transcutaneous oxygen content. So that's skin blood flow showed higher levels of oxygen in the Kure trial versus the control trial. So that's telling us that something is definitely happening. Drinking the Kure water is directly affecting the levels of transcutaneous oxygen versus a control where it's normal water, essentially. The only conclusion that we can essentially make from that is that Kure is having an effect on those levels of oxygen in the skin blood flow.
Isn't that extraordinary? Now, You've been in this game for a long time. Have you ever seen a product like this before that's been able to do something like that?
Not directly in terms of levels of oxygen measured in that area of the body, no.
So we call Kure an oxygen supplement. That's how we describe ourselves. Do you think that's a fair analysis?
I would think so. It has that much more oxygen in it than ordinary water, and it's coming out of the water and into the skin blood flow.
Let's move into some of the findings from the trial because they are really nothing short of extraordinary. Let's start with lactate. What was observed regarding lactate?
We noticed that the levels of blood lactate concentration were lower in the latter stages of exercise and into 2 minutes into recovery in the Kure trial compared with the control trial.
So that's a remarkable kind of outcome, isn't it? Especially if you're seeing it consistently. So what does that actually tell you, in terms of recording a lower lactate score? What's actually happening inside the person where that lactate is building up?
Okay, so the implications of that are related to metabolism, exercise metabolism. In exercise, we rely predominantly either on aerobic and or anaerobic metabolism, and the percentage contribution of those two metabolic processes is dictated by a number of factors, the intensity of exercise or the fitness of the individual. Now, we had individuals that we tested in different conditions, but the same relative exercise loads, so everything was controlled other than whether they were drinking the normal water or the Kure water. So in the Kure trial, the lactate, this is blood lactate levels, were lower. So that implies that there is less anaerobic metabolism. Now, anaerobic metabolism is associated with increased levels of something called lactic acid that's produced in the muscle. This dissociates very, very quickly, and the lactate moves into the bloodstream, which is why we can measure it easy. But the acid stays in the muscle, and acid is associated with more rapid muscular fatigue. So if there's less lactate, that suggests there's less lactic acid or less acid accumulation in the muscle, and therefore the likelihood of fatigue is reduced. Also, it suggests a shift to aerobic metabolism. Now, carbohydrate is a very versatile fuel in the body. It can be used anaerobically or aerobically. If we use it anaerobically, we get energy quickly, but it's very inefficient. In other words, we use an awful lot of carbohydrate for a little energy return.
Right.
But if we use it aerobically, we get a lot more energy from our carbohydrate. So a reduction in lactate level suggests more efficient use of carbohydrate because we're using less anaerobic metabolism and more aerobic metabolism for the same level of exercise.
Wow. And what are the potential benefits for professional or competitive athletes?
Well, the potential benefits are a delay in fatigue, potentially during exercise, and also a slower rate of carbohydrate depletion. And carbohydrate is one of the main fuels that we use in exercise. So if you can delay the rate of carbohydrate depletion, that in itself will result in a delay in fatigue.
Wow.
So athletes should be able to exercise for longer at the same intensity.
Wow. And so for us, the way that, from an admittedly non-scientific expert perspective, if you can reduce lactic acid buildup, if you can reduce lactate, then it means that you can recover more quickly, it means that you can train harder, and it means you can ultimately perform better on the field. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think during exercise, so for the same intensity, you can fuel it differently, or you could work at a higher intensity, before you start to produce the lactate. So you could train harder.
Right.
Into recovery, if your lactate levels are dropping more rapidly, then that's very beneficial as well because you're recovering more rapidly, and whatever's happening to that lactate into recovery, and various things can happen to it. We can use it as a fuel directly, or it can be transported to the liver and essentially converted back into carbohydrates. And the faster that's done, the faster carbohydrate stores are replenished into recovery, the more ready someone is to compete or train again within a given time period.
Absolutely fascinating. Now, what kind of scores did we see? What was the most significant reduction that we saw in lactate in this study?
So post-exercise, we saw an approximately 20% reduction in the blood lactate levels 2 minutes post-exercise in the Kure trial versus the control trial.
Wow. So what you're saying is, Kure water, apparently, at first blush anyway, after analysis of the trial results, appears to have the potential to significantly reduce lactate buildup in athletes?
There's definite trends in the reduction of lactate during exercise and into recovery that are certainly beneficial for exercise performance.
How fascinating. So does that speak alone, do you think, as to the efficacy of Kure as an oxygen supplement, as an exercise supplement?
I think that, we saw that in the Kure trial versus the control trial, and everything else was controlled in terms of the experimental trial. So the only conclusion that you could come to is that Kure is doing something beneficial in terms of metabolism during and following exercise.
How absolutely fascinating. Okay, let's shift gears. Let's talk about blood pressure. What did we notice about, I know that blood pressure was recorded as part of this trial. What did we notice?
Well, we recorded blood pressure, post-exercise blood pressure, and we noticed a 5% reduction in blood pressure in the Kure trial versus the control trial.
So what you're saying is that people who drank Kure had a 5% reduction in their blood pressure versus people who drank the placebo.
Compared with the placebo.
That's extraordinary. And that's from drinking just one bottle of this product.
Yep, that's what we did in the trial, yeah.
Incredible. And so what are the implications of being able to reduce blood pressure like that?
The benefits of reduced blood pressure post-exercise and lower than normal reductions in blood pressure post-exercise are associated with increases in vasodilation, that's the relaxation of blood vessels in the previously active muscles. And if we get that, then we get a better blood flow to those muscles, less resistance to flow, and less resistance to flow means better delivery of nutrients to accelerate recovery and faster removal of any byproducts such as lactate. And so in the Kure trial, we saw lower lactate levels. We also saw, as we've said, 5% lower blood pressure levels. So it may well be that the lower blood pressure is facilitating more rapid removal of lactate into recover.
So I want to come back to, the implications of being able to reduce blood pressure. I want to zoom out a little bit, take it from the lab into the real world, if you like, in just a second. But just for a second, would you just put those two things together? When you look at, up to a 20% reduction in lactate, combined with an up to a 5% reduction in blood pressure post-exertion, what are the implications there for professional athletes and competitive athletes in terms of their recovery, in terms of their performance?
Well, okay, so it's accelerated recovery, okay? Accelerated recovery means that the individual will be ready to train again or compete again. From a training perspective, faster recovery means that you're in a better condition to start training again. And therefore, if you're using this as part of your training regime, then if you can train harder or more frequently, because your recovery is more rapid, then overall the potential is that you could have more rapid training adaptations and reach particular goals, etc., more rapidly.
Wow.
From a performance perspective, then recovering more rapidly. If you think about tennis, for example, okay, these guys that are on the tour and they're playing a 5-setter, it goes late into the evening, and then they're playing again, say 24 hours later. They need to fully recover. So Kure may well contribute significantly to the rate at which these guys can recover, and so that they're ready at their top level to play the next match.
Wow. And one of the things that I love about this product is that it's literally water, Steve. It is H2O. It is water in its purest form. No emulsifiers, no additives, well, other than the huge amount of oxygen that we managed to put in there.
Yeah.
But it means that there are no hidden nasties, none of these products that we see that, yes, might have an impact on lactate reduction, like bicarb soda, for instance. So it means that you don't get any of those side effects. It's literally just water.
Yeah.
So, on the basis of what you've seen, do you think that this is a product that will presumably be of considerable interest to athletes and professional athletes, competitive athletes and the like?
So Kure is providing hydration as well as potentially oxygen that facilitates more rapid recovery. So it's got two potential advantages in terms of athlete recovery.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about cardiovascular strain, because cardiovascular disease is a killer. Mm-hmm. It's on the rise, especially in the Western world, due to a number of various, reasons. But what are the implications as a society for a product that has the ability to reduce blood pressure by 5% after drinking one bottle? And what I'm kind of getting at here is this. if in a clinical setting you were to see, someone with cardiovascular disease of some kind experience, say, a 10% reduction in their blood pressure, you would probably say, wouldn't you, that is a significant result, clinically significant result. And what are we doing from a lifestyle perspective or a diet perspective that's actually led to that? So if we're to look at a 5% reduction simply from drinking a bottle of water, I mean, what are the implications for society and for cardiovascular disease research more broadly?
I mean, I think, so what we saw was post-exercise hypertension and a reduction in blood pressure post-exercise to a greater extent than drinking the placebo in the control trial. Reduced blood pressure means reduced peripheral resistance, which means that the heart doesn't have to work as hard to pump blood around the body, and therefore the heart itself, it's a muscle. It needs its own blood supply and its own oxygenated blood supply, and therefore if it's not working as hard, it's not using as much energy and it's not demanding as much oxygen. Therefore it can supply itself more easily with the oxygen that's needed, and that potentially could reduce the risk of cardiovascular complications post-exercise. In a more general sense, if Kure was to have beneficial effects on reducing an individual's blood pressure at rest just through drinking it, not without exercise, then there would be quite significant findings. And that's maybe something that's worth investigating with regards to the potential benefits of Kure. But we can't say 100% right now that Kure would automatically reduce someone's blood pressure in that way. What we have seen is a reduction in post-exercise hypotension to a greater extent in Kure. And that may be beneficial for athletes in the recovery sense, predominantly in terms of supplying that blood to the previously active muscles.
Yeah. So look, I really actually like the way that you put that. So if you were to get all of these quite extraordinary results from drinking just one bottle of Kure before exercise, do you think that it is at least worth investigating whether or not drinking more Kure for a longer period of time, say 24 to 48 hours before exercise, could turbocharge some of the results that we've seen in this trial?
Yeah, I think there's probably lots of questions that have come out of this trial that would be really, really worth investigating, whether it's drinking more prior to exercise or whether it's drinking post-exercise at intervals post-exercise. Okay, so it may enhance recovery, drinking more may enhance responses in terms of fatigue rates, etc., during exercise. So all of those would be really, really interesting to investigate for sure.
So on the basis of what you've seen in this trial, do you believe, and would you be happy to comment in the positive, that Kure could be viewed as a successful and effective oxygen delivery mechanism?
In the trials that we carried out, we saw increases in cutaneous oxygenation as a result of drinking Kure. We did not see that in the placebo. So yes, Kure certainly seems to facilitate oxygen getting into the body.
Fascinating. Well, Steve, I have to say thank you ever so much for your time. This has been a really, really interesting trial. It's been fascinating to work with you as part of this and to get your insights here today. Thank you so much for joining us on the Kure Lab. We look forward to speaking again with you at some point in the near future.
Okay, thanks very much.